great educational programs on board. We have biologists, geologists. We even have a penguinologist that comes with us to Antarctica. So if you're someone who really likes to explore and learn in the areas in which you're going to, maybe you like going to Italy and going to a lot of the museums and seeing the history, that's a big component of a Quark expedition voyage. If you're a checklister too, I'm a bit of a checklister myself. Like, I wanted to see a polar bear, so I wanted to go to the Arctic and go to Spitsbergen off the coast of Norway. But then also penguins. I hadn't seen a penguin before going to Antarctica. So if you want to checklist maybe seeing a penguin or going to your seventh continent, tends to be the seventh continent for a lot of travelers going to Antarctica, or maybe it's between Africa and Antarctica. So those checklist travelers. Also, if you're escapists, and I know right now a lot of us who weren't escapists before are wanting to have the escapist mentality now of going to a remote region, getting in the heart of nature and unplugging from the devices and things like that. But we do have Wi-Fi on board, so there are Wi-Fi and internet accessibilities. If you don't want to completely detach from your social media, because it is fun to share some pictures too and little emails while you're at the bottom of the world. But it's definitely that type of traveler that the wellness industry is huge right now, and it's just taking the time to get in the heart of nature and relax and unwind and be in the middle of these really remote locations of the planet. And then there's the adventurer. If you're someone who really loves to go hiking and be adventurous and have an adventurous spirit, those are the types of travelers that come with Quark expeditions as well. But I honestly believe even if you're on a ship and sailing in these remote locations of the planet, that's an adventurous spirit as well. I'll share with you some fun additional adventure options that are available, such as kayaking and things like that too in these remote locations. So I want to start out with a map. So I'll slowly start taking you to the bottom of the world. We'll start in South America that you can see here. So the trip, I'll show you that itinerary shortly, but the trip does start in Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost tip of South America. And so if you haven't been to South America yet, this is a great opportunity to explore a little bit of South America as well. So we do have trips though that go from Chile, from Punta Arenas, where we fly across the Drake Passage, the body of water between South America and then Antarctic Peninsula, that finger of land that sticks out of Antarctica. And so there are lots of different types of avenues to get to the continent, whether it's flying by plane and meeting the ship there with us, or it's cruising the Drake Passage. So lots of different opportunities. And Sheila's trip is a 14-day trip crossing the Antarctic Circle, going right into 66 degrees south. But just to let you know, there are longer trips available too that are 20 and 23 days that include the Falklands and South Georgia, beautiful subantarctic regions as well. But today we are focusing on Sheila's voyage, lots to see and do in Antarctica. So I want to take you to the bottom of the world, the 5th largest continent. And what I love hearing is some fun facts. So Antarctica is actually covered in 98% ice. So it's the Earth's most southern continent. And it does include the geographic South Pole. So like I was talking about the North Pole earlier, this is the geographic South Pole is located in Antarctica. So it's 14 million square kilometers, Antarctica, the 5th largest continent. And it's twice the size of Australia. So that just gives you an idea of the magnitude of Antarctica. And this finger of land, the peninsula, is where a lot of operators go because it's known as the largest concentration of wildlife in Antarctica. So that's why a lot of operators explore this regions with guests. Commonly asked question is, when's the best time to go and when do we go? Well, our season, because we only do polar travel, is quite long. We're in Antarctica from the end of October all the way to the beginning of April. So it's a really big season. Because we only do polar travel, we're able to stay there. We have 5 ships in our fleet, and there's no bad time to go to Antarctica. I've been in a few different months and you can see different things. November and December is great for the skiing. So we have cross-country skiing, a lot of those snow sports like mountaineering and that sort of thing. But beginning of January and end of December is when the chicks start to hatch. And so a lot of people want to see the penguin chicks, but you can still see them in February as well, which I really liked going in February. And then of course, whale season. So I'll get into the heart of what you can see in February and early March, because that is when the great trip that Sheila is hosting will be traveling there. But a lot of people ask me, why Antarctica? And as we mentioned, it is sometimes the seventh continent on people's bucket lists or travel list, for sure, to cross off that. But it's a strong desire to see wildlife. So if any of you, if you've been to maybe Galapagos or an African safari, I'd been to Kenya and it was very similar, getting in the little rubber boats, these incredible Zodiacs, and going around, very similar to an African safari of getting in the Jeep and going around and seeing the wildlife. So if you love wildlife, definitely put Antarctica on your list. There's an abundance of wildlife. But also if you are a well-seasoned traveler, you've been and exploring so many places, maybe you've cruised all the rivers and you're thinking, now what? Why not cruise some beautiful fjords in Antarctica and experience an entirely new environment? If you've been to Alaska, or if you're a big skier, seeing mountain ranges and ice formations, definitely put Antarctica on your list too. So there's so many reasons to go to Antarctica. So this is the itinerary that Sheila has a group on. And this is one of my favorite itineraries because it can only be offered in January and February and early March, so in the later season, because it's the itinerary that goes further south in Antarctica that we offer. So it's crossing right into the Antarctic Circle. So maybe you've crossed the Arctic Circle and now you want to checklist the Antarctic Circle. But what I love about it is it's 14 days. And a lot of our other trips that don't go as far south are 11 and 12 days. So still a lot of time to explore the peninsula, but this is even more opportunity to see more wildlife, more opportunities to have different landings and see different sunsets, because weather definitely comes into play with an expedition. We are at the hands of the weather. So there might be one morning where we're trying to go out, maybe we do a little Zodiac cruise, but it's foggy, so we don't do a landing. So the weather definitely comes into play. So a longer voyage in Antarctica gives you more opportunity to see and do different things. So Sheila's trip, like Sheila mentioned, is in 2022 in February. So February 2022, the 22nd to March 7th. So I'll go through some of the reasons why February and March is a great time to go to Antarctica. So from mid-February and onwards in Antarctica, the pack ice is receding. And so that's why, even with a really great ice strengthened hull for going and maneuvering in the ice in these regions, we can actually go even further south than in any other time of the year. And so the days are shortened, so the sunsets are spectacular. So lots of really spectacular sunsets. If you're a photographer, February and March are fantastic times to go to Antarctica because of the light. I'll talk about some whales too, like humpbacks and minkies. You also can see killer whales. Now, I went in February. There are 5 pods of killer whales that live in Antarctica all year round. So I did see some pods of orcas, but my favorite were the humpbacks. I saw a lot of humpbacks in February than any other month that I've been to Antarctica. Also, we'll talk a little bit about glaciers and icebergs and great landings. The temperature isn't as bad as people think it is. So in February, I live in Toronto. We are a US-based company in Seattle, but I live in Toronto. So it's no colder than what it gets in Toronto. It's actually warmer in Antarctica when we go because we're going in their summer, in the heart of their summer. And so it averaged, when I went in February, I went with my 66-year-old aunt for my first time to Antarctica. So we spent Valentine's Day together in Antarctica. It was the beginning of our trip. So it was one of my favorite Valentine's Day celebrations, being with my Aunt Lucy. But what I loved about it, it wasn't as cold as I thought it was going to be. It ranged from about -5 degrees Celsius, which was a chillier day with wind chill, but it was also +5. So there were days where I had my parka, my yellow parka that you see there in the Zodiacs with everyone gets a parka, it's theirs to keep. So there were days where I was on a landing walking around, and I would tie my parka around my waist and just had my fleece on, or my liner of my parka on. So it's quite surprising how warm it can get in the heart of the Antarctic summer.
Laura's just mentioning she was there the first week of January, and it was 14 degrees one day, 14 plus.
There you go. And it is the summer when the sun's shining and there's no wind. I believe that it got that warm, and it's surprising. So not every day would be like that, but I love that Laura mentioned that, because people think that it's so cold and windy and bustling, and we're not going in the Antarctic winter. So thanks so much for saying that, Laura, because I experienced some really beautiful temperatures as well, because it's the heart of the Antarctic summer. So a lot of travelers, as I mentioned, go to the peninsula, that finger of land, because not only it's snow and ice covered mountain peaks up to 9,200 feet tall, so gorgeous mountain ranges. And there's a silence in Antarctica, in the peninsula, that I had never experienced before in my life. The silence was just deafening in some moments of being in the Zodiac and just sitting there with all this beautiful ice and snow-covered mountain ranges around. But the highlights too in this area, in the peninsula, there's penguins everywhere. So we'll also talk about the penguins. But with the peninsula, the finger of land, before we get there on this journey, so day one, everyone comes into Ushuaia, the southern town of Argentina. And with Sheila and I can help you with your flights as well, if you don't want to book your flights on your own, because you'll go through Buenos Aires in Argentina, and highly recommend spending a night or two there if you haven't seen that city already. Maybe catch a tango show that Sheila can help you with, and before you go on your way to Ushuaia. If you don't want to spend the time in Buenos Aires and you're not a big city person, you can absolutely go right through to Ushuaia. I definitely highly recommend, Sheila and I recommend about 6 hours between your international flight getting into Buenos Aires before you head down to Ushuaia. So the flight down to Ushuaia is about 3.5 hours from Buenos Aires, and you generally have to switch airports depending on where you're coming in from Buenos Aires to a small little airport called Aeroparque. So Ezeiza and Aeroparque, Ezeiza is the international airport, and sometimes you can get flights down to Ushuaia from the international airport, so you might not need to switch. But highly recommend a morning of exploring in Ushuaia as well. So when you arrive in Ushuaia, we pick you up from the airport, take you to an included night hotel, and on day 2 is actually when we're embarking the ship. So you have the morning of day 2 to yourself. I liked exploring Ushuaia, the town, myself, but then I also went into Terra del Fuego National Park, a lovely park, and I did a little walk on my own. But Sheila can also help you book a little tour if you did want an added excursion in Ushuaia or Terra del Fuego National Park. Now, day 2, we embark the ship in the afternoon, and we're going through a lovely area called the Beagle Channel that we're sailing through. So we encourage people to get out on deck and see that view as well. But it's the infamous Drake Passage that a lot of people get scared off and getting scared going to Antarctica. This sailing takes about 1.5 days to 2 days to cross in each direction. But I loved getting out on board. I'm very prone to seasickness, but I loved crossing and maybe getting a glimpse of the albatross. A lot of people have been able to see, our ornithologists, our birders, encourage people to get out to see maybe birds. The albatross sometimes goes counterclockwise around the ship and soars around the ship to get the draft. And it has the largest wingspan of any species. So it's possible to see the albatross. But there is a convergence of water in the Drake Passage, and it's a lot of bodies of water coming together. So it's the oceans converging, and this is what makes it quite rough. And so it doesn't matter if you go in February with Sheila or in November or December, this body of water can be rough one moment, and then the next afternoon or the next morning be calm. So we call it the Drake Lake or the Drake Shake. And so it really does depend on the weather. It has nothing to do with going either in February or December. I had the Drake Lake on my way down to Antarctica, and then on my way back it got a little rough, so I did take some gravel and definitely slept a little bit more than usual. But throughout the Drake Passage, we have lectures, so great educational programs from our amazing expedition team, which I'll talk to in a bit, because the highlights are a lot of the education component in this trip as well. And then one time at dinner, when I was with my Aunt Lucy, we were crossing the Drake Passage on the way down, and I had a wonderful Malbec glass of wine with my dinner, because beer and wine is included with dinner. And the server came around, and I'm glad I caught a glimpse, because this lovely server was topping up my glass, but it was a Cabernet Sauvignon. And I said, no, I don't want a convergence in my wine glass. Leave the red wine separate, please. And we all had a good laugh because we wanted the convergence left in the Drake Passage. So that is a worry, but I think people are scared of it, but we have 2 doctors on board. So there is a doctor that's a part of our expedition team, and then a doctor that's a part of our ship crew. So if you do need some extra seasickness medication, we do have things like ginger pills, even bananas. We come around with crackers and things to help settle your stomach. But the highlights in Antarctica, the penguins, they're definitely the draw of the show. The stars and the draw of going to Antarctica. And there's 17 species in the world of penguins. And I love this little guy. These are the chin straps. So you're going to see that little flag there, that red flag. And we're trying to get off the ship as much as possible. So we tend to make our first landing in this archipelago of islands called the South Shetland Islands on our way to Antarctica. And generally that's the first landing. And you'll see these red flags because what's wonderful about our expedition team is that we make it safe for everyone, and our expedition team stakes out these sites, so not to go further than these flags, but it's neat to be able to go off on your own and have moments where you can witness the penguins, and there's penguins everywhere in Antarctica. So we leave room for the penguin highway. So you'll see this little, on the right of this flag here, it's a little pathway, and we call them penguin highways because you'll just see the penguins come up and down these little penguin highways. Maybe they're going into the water to go for food, to come back and feed their chicks, or maybe they're just hanging out and walking around. So they're so curious. And even though we have every landing site, we have a briefing when you get out of the Zodiac to get on the landing site of how far you can approach the penguins. If you're just standing there or sitting on a rock, the penguins are so curious. They know they have not been hunted, and they have no real land predators, because they do have the skuas that are predators on land, these birds that can attack some of the small little penguin chicks and the eggs. But they just walk around freely. So this is a chin strap penguin. And I love standing there on one landing, and I was looking at a glacier, and all of a sudden I had my legs about shoulder width apart, and a little chin strap penguin just walked right through my legs and then just looked right up at me and then kept walking. So even though we're not allowed to approach them, if you stand still, they definitely can come up to you. And then you don't want to move because you don't want to scare them. So it's fun to get some great shots, even if you're not a photographer. I used my camera phone quite a bit.
Is there a suggested distance to keep between the?
Yeah, usually about 15 feet or so we try and keep. But then once you stop and you have it at a safe distance, they're quite inquisitive and come and want to check you out for sure. And then sometimes they kind of go on their merry way and go in a different direction for sure.
Great question. They come to you, you don't have to back up.
Exactly. Yeah. One actually, I was so still that it actually tried to taste a little bit of my waterproof pant leg and had a little nibble, and then just kept walking. They're so safe, and they're very fun creatures.
Laura's just mentioning they'll play with your bootlaces.
Yeah, there you go. It's that if you have boot laces, so our muck boots that we provide on loan for the duration of the trip, which are waterproof and they're very warm, which don't have laces, but if you bring your own boots and you want you to use your own boots, that might happen, Laura. So that's funny. That's great.
She also just mentioned she had a Canadian doctor on her expedition, and he was passing out seasickness pills before the Drake. So if you take them, you don't have to worry about anything. So that's good advice too.
That's great advice. Yeah. And then there's the Gentoo penguin, another species that's commonly seen on the peninsula, along with the chinstrap. But I love seeing too, there's so many different types of species that we can see. Generally 5 types of species, whether it's the Adelie, the Gentoo, or the chinstrap. So this is the Adelie, and I love the dark faces on the Adelie. But I loved getting out on deck and seeing the penguins even sometimes on the icebergs, because I saw my first penguin when I was out on deck, and the penguin just jumped up on an iceberg when we were approaching Antarctica. So it's really great to encourage the ship can be one of the best viewing platforms for wildlife as well as scenery. But then of course, walking amongst the penguins is always a favorite. So I don't say we guarantee penguins in Antarctica, but it's safe to say that you will see an abundance of penguins in rookeries. There were so many penguins on one landing in February that I was scared to even step on a penguin. So it's wonderful to see the different types of species in Antarctica and walk amongst the penguins. But one morning I was in a Zodiac with my aunt and we were on our way to a landing. But we stopped and didn't go on a landing that morning that was planned because it is true expedition. Anything can happen in a moment. We pivot to weather or wildlife. And we saw 2 humpback whales, a mother and her calf, come up to our Zodiac. So a couple of the other Zodiacs, we all turned off our engines and we were in the presence of these magnificent creatures. So whales in February and March are abundant. And so humpbacks have migrated down to Antarctica, a lot of them at that time. So not only 5 breeding penguin species in Antarctica, you can see like the Gentoo, the king, the rockhopper, and the Gentoos, sorry, not the king penguin, but the Gentoos and the Adelies that I showed and the chinstraps, but the whales, I loved seeing the whales. And what's neat about this is the Zodiacs are so stable and the whales really do, I get asked a lot, these whales are so huge. Do we need to be scared of them? And they're such gentle creatures, the humpbacks and the orcas and the minkies, that we've never even had a problem even with kayakers. We've had some kayakers at groups of 10 and 12 that have whales come right up to the stand-up paddle boards or the kayaks, and the whales are just so gentle. And in that situation, if you are choosing a kayaking excursion and you are in an inflatable kayak and you get scared, we definitely have a Zodiac on site to get someone back in safely, because some people have different comfort zones, that's for sure. But the whales are wonderful. I grew up on the west coast of British Columbia, and I still love seeing whales in Antarctica after seeing them on the west coast of British Columbia, or even seeing them in Hawaii. When I had been in Hawaii, there was nothing like seeing a humpback whale in Antarctica. So the humpbacks are just beautiful. And again, the minkies also a possibility. I didn't get a good sight of the minkie. I did see them on the comfort of the vessel with the binoculars. The expedition team are on deck and on the bridge 24/7. So we are rotating with our expedition team members, our biologists and our glaciologists on the lookout for wildlife. So if there is a pot of something, we will gently wake people up even at 4 or 5 in the morning if there's something really spectacular to be seen, or seals too. If there's a neat seal sighting, we'll encourage people to get out on deck and even interrupt a meal time. So it is true expedition. We try and get out at least twice a day for an excursion, whether it's a Zodiac cruise or a landing, where we're constantly encouraging people to get out on deck for possible wildlife sightings like the whales. So great time to see whales.
You mentioned convergence when you were joking about your wine. But it's the convergence that draws all the whales there for a feeding ground, isn't it?
That is such a great point, Sheila. Yes, and gathers all the krill for the feeding too. Yeah. Yeah, and then it creates the warm water to get to Antarctica too. So they're going for the Antarctic summer in the warmer waters. That's a great point. And what's neat is a lot of the scientists on board will have great educational programs to even learn more about it, which I loved filling my notebook of notes after I'd come back from a lecture and going through some great notes from the glaciologists too. So I never was into ice formations, and I never got sick of ice going to Antarctica. And glaciers, if you've been to Alaska and have cruised Alaska, and enjoy cruising, Antarctica is definitely for you. But if you're also an active traveler and enjoy hiking and getting off the ship, and you're maybe not traditionally a cruiser and this might be your first time exploring an area on a vessel, this is still for you, because the glaciers, witnessing them from the comfort of the vessel, I loved curling up with a cup of hot chocolate after an excursion of going out and checking out a glacier and a Zodiac, but then coming back, getting a different perspective and sitting by myself on the stern of the ship, and just witnessing the glaciers from the comfort of the vessel too. Glaciers are just so beautiful, of every imaginable size. But then also icebergs. There's no two icebergs alike, and it's a piece of art that you'll never see again. So I loved getting in the Zodiacs, and our expedition team member, our Zodiac driver, because our expedition team are actually the ones driving the Zodiacs, I loved having one of our team members just have everyone sit in silence in the Zodiac. Even though there weren't any whales around, we were able to experience an iceberg, and we were able to hear the snap, crackle, and pop of the iceberg and hearing the ice melt. And then one iceberg, we were at a safe distance and we actually saw the iceberg roll. So ice is just beautiful, and only 10% of what you see in an iceberg is above water. And that's the magic of going through our North American winter. It's one of those moments that I keep having and thinking about are my iceberg moments in Antarctica. And sometimes with a bartender, we'll even get a piece of ice from the expedition team member, and the expedition team member will break a piece off of ice and we'll make cocktails with it in the bar that evening as well.
Very cool. Literally very cool.
Yeah, literally very cool. The sunset, yeah, go ahead.
How was the penguin poop when you were there? You were in February, right?
It was, yeah, the penguin poop, the guano. That's a very good point, because you can't smell the poo from the pictures, and it definitely takes some people off guard. Not necessarily right when they get on a landing, but when they approach a penguin rookery, you definitely can smell it approaching a penguin rookery. It's not for everyone, so you'll see sometimes people will put either their neck warmer around their nose, or maybe a scarf. Some people even buy nose plugs from the gift shop. So with your amenity, Sheila, that you're giving everyone who travels with you, some people can go in the gift shop and buy some nose plugs.
Awesome. Laura's just mentioning she saw 7 different kinds of penguins.
Oh, 7! That's amazing. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Because sometimes you can see the Gentoos. They'll see an odd one that'll be out on its own, and the king, and the rockhopper and the macaroni. What species did you see, Laura? Because sometimes you might see the odd macaroni or something there.
Do you remember, Laura? Do you want to come on camera?
Because there's 17 species in the world, and it's so neat to be able to see so many on the peninsula. That's so great.
Yeah, so all the ones that you said, and then this guy was like one loner guy.
Oh, you did? That's great.
He hung out with this other group. He was the only one of his species. He just sort of hung on to these other guys because he got lost from his group, and he just came back with them every year. So
wow.
All the other ones you said, the Gentoo and the Chinstap and all those ones I saw.
Okay. Those. Oh, that's amazing. That's so great. And you went in January, Laura, again? You were
first week of January. Yeah.
First week of January, right. I couldn't remember when. And so going in February, at the end of February and beginning of March, not only with the sunsets with the Zodiac cruising, because sometimes we'll have sunset cruises or sunrise cruises. So on one of my trips, we got woken up really early, gently. So the expedition leader was like, good morning, everyone. Good morning. If you want to go for a Zodiac cruise before breakfast and watch a little bit of the sunrise, please come down for another excursion this morning. And it was neat because I was able to get up, around 5 o'clock or so and have a lovely Zodiac cruise for an hour and a half, bundle up, and then come back and have a nice hot breakfast. So just another thing that you can experience in February and March that you wouldn't be able to experience in November or December in Antarctica. What I love too is one evening when I went in February, the end of February, we already had 2 Zodiac cruises. In the evening, we were all in the bar listening to a wonderful bar talk, a fun story of one of the penguinologists that had lived in Antarctica for an Antarctic winter and telling us about the research. She got interrupted with a marine biologist who got on the loudspeaker and said, whoever wants to leave your beverage in the bar and come and have a 3rd Zodiac excursion today, come, grab your parkas, grab your boots, let's get in the Zodiacs. And there were 40 crab-eater seals gathering krill at sunset. And so that's just another thing that we were able to see. The marine biologist in 17 years of traveling with Quark expeditions had never seen the crab-eater seals gathering krill at sunset like that. So just another opportunity to get in the Zodiacs and see something. It's very unusual. So expedition is sometimes a word that people get a bit apprehensive about. They think it might be too adventurous for them, but really the expedition is just in the sense that you don't have a set itinerary. Our expedition leader might have an idea of an area of which we might be in and something that we might see, but because of weather or a Zodiac cruise seeing humpback whales instead of going on a Zodiac landing like what I had too, it's just a pivot. Everything can change due to weather and wildlife. So it's really, that is the true nature of an expedition and not a traditional cruise where you're going particularly by an onboard program. So what I love about the itinerary that Sheila picked and why it's one of my favorite itineraries is it really is exploring Antarctica in depth with the peninsula. More opportunities for landings, more opportunities for going further and maybe even into the heart of cruising into the Lemire Channel, one of the most beautiful areas, and my personal opinion, on the planet. And so it's 14 days. So day 1, February 22nd, you're arriving in Ushuaia. And then you're overnighting in Ushuaia. And then day 2 is February 23rd, and you're embarking the ship in the afternoon. So you're having dinner on board on day 2. And then on day 14, the morning of March 7th, you're disembarking and either being taken to the airport for your flight home or flight to Buenos Aires for another excursion, or maybe you even want to stay in Ushuaia and go into Terra del Fuego National Park if you didn't experience that at the beginning. And then in the morning, you're disembarking for your afternoon flight to Buenos Aires, or a morning flight, whatever works for you. So it's a 14-day trip. You're on a ship, which I'll explain in a moment, one of the fastest ships in Antarctica, the Ocean Diamond, one of the fastest ships in our fleet in Antarctica. So she goes about 60 knots. So you can definitely sometimes even get your first continental landing or your first excursion in the South Shetland Islands on your way to Antarctica, maybe even on the afternoon of the 25th or the morning of the 24th. So just depending on the weather. So definitely inquire with Sheila about that itinerary. But adventure options, there's so much to do with Quark expeditions, and this is one of the biggest differentiators from us and a lot of the other operators in Antarctica, is there's so much included, like the Zodiac cruising and the hiking, the photography programs, the infamous polar plunge. So going in the polar plunge, and I think, Laura, you did the polar plunge, right? I think I remember.
I did the camping.
You did the camping in Antarctica.
Ah,
Well,
was
that is one
cool.
thing that's available in January that we don't do at the end of February, because it's amazing that you did that and took advantage of that, Laura, because at the middle of February and end of February, the snow starts to melt so much that the landings become really mucky. And so the camping was just got very mucky for the equipment and everything. But I love that you did that in January. Did you do it in the bivouac sack, Laura, or did you do it in the tent?
In the tent.
Nice. Oh, that's
Very
so great.
neat.
Love
Wow.
it.
In Leith Cove.
In Leith Cove, beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
that's where you hear all like the cracking and the big chunks of ice falling in, and yeah, you get the. And it was like daylight. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we realized what time it was. It's like, oh, maybe we should go to bed. They're coming to get us at 6 in the morning. Because it's so light for so long, you can watch the ice the whole time.
Wow.
And that's so, yeah, it's so beautiful. And so with being at the end of February, we don't have camping. So, but we have some great additional adventure options. I honestly believe that the regular program is more than enough. Like my first 2 trips to Antarctica, I did the Zodiac cruising and the hiking, getting out on deck, and the photography programs. But there are additional adventure options with Sheila's group that you can purchase. For instance, the actual sea kayaking program. So we have small groups of 10 and 12, so it does sell out fast. It's an additional $995 per person, but we supply the guides, the kayaking guides, the expedition gear like the wetsuits, so the dry suits, as well as the paddles and the personal flotation devices and the dry sacks. But then there's also, if you don't want to commit to a kayaking program where you can kayak as many times as possible, like the kayaking program, we offer a paddling program that's a one-time only in the inflatable kayak. So it's very stable if you have little to no kayaking experience. We also supply the guides and the dry suits and the personal flotation devices. And I enjoy doing this. I tried it in the Arctic. I didn't try it in Antarctica, but I loved it for a couple of hours, an hour and a half going out. And this adventure option is $295 per person. So definitely inquire with Sheila if you're thinking about holding a cabin and going to Antarctica to inquire about the additional adventure options. There's availability now, but definitely as we approach the departure, they sell out quite quickly before going on board. One of the highlights of traveling with Quark Expedition is our expedition team. We have the lowest ratio in the industry. It's 1 expedition team member to 7 passengers. And I love having the expedition not only giving the educational programs like lectures throughout the voyage, educational presentations, but they're also sitting with you during dinners and lunches. And I love this about our expedition team, sharing stories and hearing stories about their experience in the polar regions and other things that they do throughout the rest of the year on their off time, not going to the polar regions. We also have something in the industry that a lot of other operators are looking at us for, and it's our Quark Academy program. So we launched the Quark Academy program in 2017, and Quark Expeditions was the first polar expedition company to have a full polar training program. So our goal was to establish a standard of level of training for the safety offered in the industry and being a real leader again in the polar regions, but in this area. So it's the ultimate benefit of our guests and for the protection of the polar regions as well. So this is a great, great program that I'm very, very proud of with Quark Expeditions. So we do have a fleet. I won't go over all of our ships at this moment. So you can definitely, if you're thinking about doing another trip that isn't the February crossing the circle departure with Sheila, we have 5 ships in our fleet, 4 of which go to Antarctica, the new Ultramarine, the Ocean Adventurer, the World Explorer, and then the Ocean Diamond. So the Ocean Diamond is the vessel that is hosting Sheila's group. So this is still under 200 passengers. So everyone can get off the ship at the same time with a ship under 200 passengers. When you're looking at traveling to the polar regions with a vessel, it's very important having under 200 passengers so everyone can get off the ship at the same time. As soon as you have a ship that's 250 passengers, 300 up to 500 passengers, not everyone can get off the ship at the same time. You've got groups A, B, C, and D. A maybe is going out and seeing the humpback whales. Maybe they come back and B, C, and D go out. And and the humpback whales have gone. And so things like that can happen with a larger vessel. So that's really important, choosing a small expedition vessel. Even if you're an experienced cruiser and you like cruising, the small ships are a wonderful way to explore the polar regions. So this is a favorite vessel among not only our expedition team, but also past passengers. It's a friendly onboard community on board the Ocean Diamond, because I love the lounges and bars and getting together with people after and seeing some pictures, other passengers' pictures, and sharing stories. But also I like the moments that I have on the Diamond, the Ocean Diamond, by myself, because sometimes being in these polar regions, a big part of it is getting in the heart of nature and having those moments of solitude as well. So all rooms have exterior views, so all outside cabins, and ensuite facilities and flat screen TVs and DVD players. And some suites do feature private balconies. So we do have private balconies on this. So if you are interested in that, definitely let Sheila know. This is one of the fastest ships in Antarctica, as I was sharing before. It's known as a stable super yacht. So all exterior views, great areas of the ship. But I wanted to share with you an observation room. And this is where a lot of people go to journal and take their binoculars if they're not on the bridge. We have an open bridge policy on all of our vessels, but that's the Ocean Diamond's known for this great, it's almost like an observation lounge, a globe almost of glass. So it's neat to be able to, maybe you're sitting there having a cup of tea and a whale comes out of nowhere and then leaves. You might have an opportunity to glimpse something like that. So not only on board do we have great meals, great dining cuisine. So we generally have 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with snacks throughout the trip. We also have libraries on board, a spa, so great expedition educational programs, and exercise rooms. So some people do feel that they're not getting enough walking out on an excursion, so they do enjoy the exercise room in addition to great themed events. But I love our daily briefings and recaps. After every day, we'll gather in the lounge or in the lecture theater before going to dinner, and we'll have highlights of the day, and then the expedition leader will share what we might see the next morning and the next day. The onboard learning doesn't just happen, though, in the lecture theater. I loved having the expedition team walk around on the deck, and they'll approach you and share with you something about the ice that you might be seeing, or if you're out there and seeing miles and miles of water, some things about the things that you might not be seeing on the eye level. I just love the onboard learning, not only in the lecture theaters. And again, the ship is one of the best viewing platforms for wildlife and nature and seeing the scenery and the mountain ranges. I loved getting out on deck as much as possible.
Michelle is asking if we need visas.
That is a great question. Not anymore for Argentina, for Canadian or US citizens. So you might have to definitely check with Sheila and your consulate about a month prior to going, because there was a change when I went where I did need a visa, for instance, going to Argentina and doing it online. But then the next time I went, I could do it upon arrival. And so they do change.
Everything is changing in a COVID world, as we know.
Exactly, Sheila. So definitely reach out about 30 days prior to travel. Sheila will send you your expedition documents too, and it'll remind you and Sheila to call the embassy before leaving as well. Because you're right, Sheila, we live in a very fluid, ever-changing environment right now. So that's a great idea to check.
So we're sorry to hear that there's actually been some cases of COVID in Antarctica now. I was very sad to hear that. It was one of the places on Earth that escaped, but I guess we're more connected than we realize.
And that's it, Sheila. A lot of scientists weren't actually going to Antarctica this season, even though a lot of operators have canceled their seasons, such as us. We haven't sailed yet this year. We're not sailing again until May, which is the Arctic season for us. But you're absolutely right. A lot of scientists would quarantine in New Zealand for 2 weeks. And what would happen is some scientists just decided not to go at all because of the risk, even quarantining in New Zealand and the risk of getting and traveling down to Antarctica. So it is possible for, and like you said, now there have been cases.
Yeah, Denise is mentioning at a Chilean research station. That's what I heard today too. There's an outbreak there, so that's most unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And it is because with Quark, we were traveling in March of 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, and we were actually in Antarctica when it was really on the rise. And so we had 3 ships, the Ocean Endeavor, a ship that's no longer in our fleet, the World Explorer, as well as the Diamond. And what was great is we had no cases on board. We were able to safely get everyone off the ship at the end of March and get everyone home safely. So I was talking to partners like Sheila that had clients on board and guests like yourselves, and we ended up getting everyone home safely. We were even doing temperature checks and things, which I'll talk about in a moment, of our 4 pillars of health and safety. We were even doing temperature checks at the end of January with people embarking and taking health and safety very seriously before it got to the point where borders were being closed and everyone was in lockdown. So.
And I'll just mention, while you have that beautiful picture there, the lounge, you talked about opportunities to connect. Laura had mentioned, on a smaller ship, you get to know people much more easily. And the picture you showed of the lounge, you can certainly see that it's an intimate experience and you interact with people and you have the opportunity to get to know people and have some great, strike up some great conversations with other people on board.
That's exactly it, Sheila. I personally feel, there's so many great operators out there that go to the polar regions, but one of the things that I feel is very special about Quark are the like-minded individuals and like-minded travelers coming from all over the world, 53 countries. And I loved, I still keep in touch with a family from Sweden and Switzerland, and I met someone from Calgary and Chicago. And so it's just neat to meet people from all over the world in Antarctica and hear stories. And our minimum age is 8 years old. So even though February and March, I'm not sure when spring break is. So it's great too if you're thinking of taking a grandchild or your niece or your nephew, or it is fantastic for children. So sometimes it's even worth pulling them out a little bit early for school, for the spring break, to go on a trip like this. Minimum age is 8, but it's a life-changing experience for teenagers and young adults as well. And there's no age limit. I was with an 86-year-old and a 99-year-old in Antarctica. And so it's a wonderful for all ages, as long as, people, I find, as long as they're stable, and we do have walking sticks and things like that for excursions, but I think it's a fantastic trip for all ages and all different types of activity levels, a leisure traveler or an active adventurous traveler. And so with Booking with Sheila too, a part of Booking with Sheila is a $250 per person onboard ship credit. So you can use it in the Polar Boutique or for an extra glass of wine in the bar after dinner. So lots to do with the onboard credit as well, or even in the spa. But one thing I do want to talk about is just quickly is our polar promise, and we're very committed to sustainability. It's always been a part of our DNA. And so in the spring of 2019, we did unveil a sustainability strategy called the Polar Promise. And so you can get that from Sheila. It's a great 76-page public document, and it highlights a lot of great things that we've done, including waste solutions, even in communities and ports where we operate. Like Ushuaia didn't ever have waste facilities and recycling programs, and it was so neat to be able to partner with local communities and do these sorts of things to help eliminate waste and create more recycling programs. And we also have people become polar ambassadors. I really do believe when you come with Quark expeditions to the ends of the earth, people become polar ambassadors and take home these everyday experiences that they had in Antarctica and bring them back to our experiences in living in our own communities at home. So in 2017, we also eliminated the single-use plastics, and we also decreased emissions from our fleet by 28% since 2010. Booking with Sheila, though, we do have an amazing book and travel with confidence policy that Sheila has locked in for your group. So there's peace of mind, booking with confidence from booking to boarding. We have you covered all the way. So please reach out to Sheila with more of this, with 4 pillars of health and safety, 30-day easy rebooking guarantees. So, you know, it's a low deposit of 10%. And there's future travel credits if you do want to cancel for any reason leading up to your departure. So please reach out to Sheila even about refund guarantees as well.
And the reduced deposit is something special that I was able to negotiate with you. That will disappear in the new year. So if anyone is considering this trip, you know, a 10% deposit is awfully nice, especially at Christmas time.
It's really great because it locks in your space, because Sheila has literally, there's only a couple of cabins left. This trip is so popular, not only the Ocean Diamond, the vessel, but the time of year that Sheila picked. Sheila really wanted to hone in on a peak time of year to go and a great itinerary. And so this trip is almost sold out except for Sheila's group space. So Sheila is great that she still has a couple of cabins in different cabin categories available to be added to her group. And so with a low deposit, like Sheila was saying, you can still lock in your spot, but pay, instead of, you know, a $2,000 deposit, dropping it down to $1,000 or so, or even less in some circumstances. So we do have passenger health and safety at our core. It has been #1 priority for Quark for the past 3 decades that we've been in business. And so I know a lot of you do have COVID-19 on your mind, and this just has reinforced our commitment to guest safety. So we do have clean expedition ships, health and safety for fellow passengers, and healthy too for the expedition team, but the environment. So this is healthy for safety of staff and expedition team too, and the environment. So please reach out to Sheila if you have any questions about our 4 pillars of health and safety and what we've done. We just came out today with our SAFE program. So sharing more with you what we're doing on board, not only of what we did pre-COVID and even having passengers and guests embark the ship during COVID with the health and safety regulations that we had with clean ships. So reach out to Sheila if you want any more details of what we're doing on board. And again, like Sheila said, a lot of things can evolve and enhance of pre-testing, 72 hours before boarding. A lot of that can change by February of 2022 too. So what you're reading, what Sheila is sharing with you now, that also might change a few months prior to departure as well.
Just someone asked me about pricing, and I will share it in an email with the specific details. But just to give you a sense, a twin window is just under 12,000 US with my group 25% discount. And if you pay in full, there's an additional 10% discount. For anyone who's interested, if you're a couple or if you have 2 ladies who want to share, Kara had mentioned that, you know, I have the only space that's left on the ship at this date. One of the things about the moving around of 2020, 2021 is that my space became at a premium very quickly. So when those people from 2020, 2021 had to be reaccommodated, we swapped around some space. And I do have one very special suite at the price of a twin window. So if anyone wants details on that, please let me know and I will share with you. Very special accommodation from Kara. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a holiday special for you, Sheila.
And the suite is quite large compared to the regular twin windows. So.
And one of the other advantages of booking with Sheila is that even if you did maybe see a shared cabin on our website, Sheila is getting the best price possible for being a valued partner and for creating this group. So you will not get the amazing pricing that Sheila does have by going through any other advisor or going through our website, just to let you know, because that's really important too. And with Sheila, I'm so grateful that I was here today to share a little bit of my personal Antarctic experience. And I love Laura sharing her experiences too. This is just great. It's making me want to go back and jump in on this group if there's if there's a little space, maybe I'll get a closet or something on board to go, because I actually haven't gone and crossed into 66 degrees south. So this is why people kind of sometimes, even though they've gone once and done an 11 and 12 day trip to Antarctica, this is why sometimes people go again, going in a different time of year, as well as being able to go farther south. So with Sheila, I just love how focused you are on adventure travel and how you specialize not only in that, but in all different types of cruises with activity levels and adventure. So I'm just so grateful that you've put this group together and the success already of people joining. So thank you so much for having me this evening, and the perfect polar theme to do during the holidays, the magic of the holidays.
Well, you know, I shared this with some clients earlier, but there's a study out that, especially in pandemic, we're dealing with all this stress. The best way to reduce your stress is to plan forward and make plans as though you're not in the middle of this, because this will end. It doesn't feel like it sometimes, but it will end.
Yeah.
And so it's thinking about making plans after the pandemic, after we all get the vaccine. And that's part of the reason why I chose 2022 to kind of, you know, hopefully we'll all have vaccines at that point and it won't be a worry. And we can get on board with Quark and experience the seventh continent. It's going to be fantastic. With that, I see we're over 6 o'clock. Wow, the excitement. If anyone wants to come on and ask any questions, please feel free. You can turn on your microphones. I stop the screen. Did you stop sharing? You did. Okay, I'll just bring everybody back. Did you turn off your share?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Okay. Let me just bring everybody back. Okay, does anyone have any questions?
I just wanted to say I went with Quark, not one of those other big ships. First of all, the other big ships, there's too many people. Like you said, you can't get on to the mainland, and because they don't have the fuel, they can't even come close. So I wanted to go on the mainland, not an island. I didn't want to wave as we went by, like on the big ships. I actually wanted to go on the land and hike, and like we did many times. We did it we went out 3 times a day sometimes, and we went hiking up into the hills and saw more penguins inside and nests and stuff like that. But I wanted to step on the mainland, not an island. So that was my big thing for choosing an expedition ship.
I think that's so great. Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing that, because that's the thing too that I forget to say. Like, you know, people are actually going on the continent, and I think that's a commonly asked question for a lot of people, is even though they see, you know, the penguins and everything, a lot of other operators, you can't get off because the ship is too big. So that is part of the magic of going with a small expedition ship. And thanks, Laura, for that. And Laura, had you been on a ship before? Like, had you traveled on ships before, or?
No, it was like the one that you can see behind me.
Yeah.
That's the one that I was on. It was a Quark one.
And because sometimes too, like I had only been on a ship like maybe twice before, because I wasn't really a cruiser, but then my dad loves cruising. So it was the best of both worlds of expedition type of travel, knowing that you have to, in these really remote locations, explore on a ship and a vessel. And it's really a home base to go and maneuver in these really remote regions of the planet in a safe way.
Yeah, in other parts of the world, I've been on the 5,000 person one, but I much rather this 100 person expedition style. The scientists, the things you learn, the things you see, the nature, and just being with a few people, you get to know them. The 5,000 thing, you'll see somebody and you won't see them again for the whole rest of the trip.
Yeah.
This is like a big moving city. But this is a lot more personal.
Making plans for after this is over, right? And plan today, travel tomorrow. And the biggest thing, expedition cruising, I mentioned this earlier, expedition cruising is really my favorite style of travel. And it's going to increase even more in popularity once the world opens up again and we start traveling, because you have that intimate group. As Laura says, you know, you're traveling with scientists and naturalists. And as Kara said, you know, you're just You're mixing with people from all over the world, like-minded, like interests, and it's a great way to see an exotic destination. And it's not, I think the sun holidays certainly have their place in people's repertoire, but these bucket list trips are going to be the ones that people want to do first, right? You couldn't travel in 2020, so now you have twice the budget for a big trip in 2022. So think of that as you're thinking about buying yourself something for Christmas as well. I will double check my inventory with Karen and Richard, her group partner who's been working with me. I do have some space that another advisor was holding with me. And so I just want to make sure of the numbers, and I will send a follow-up and let you know exactly what cabins I have left and what the prices are. And it is the last remaining space on the ship. So
that's so great, Sheila. And if you want to be a little bit inspired of the polar regions too, there's the Planet Earth series, and it's so great to watch over the holidays too. Some fun like Happy Feet movies and things like that too, to inspire you with the polar regions to dream of this, because this will happen. So I'm glad that Sheila's planning so far in advance.
Denise is just saying she's thank you to us both, and she's looking very much forward to February 2022. She's already booked her cabin.
Oh, great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. If there are no last minute questions, I'll just quickly look at the faces again. If not any, Laura's saying definitely a must-do trip. Everyone should go to Antarctica at least once in their life. I certainly agree.
That's
so
amazing.
Thank you, everyone, for joining me. This is my last Zoom before the holidays. If you celebrated Hanukkah last week, I hope it was happy. And if you're celebrating Christmas this week, I hope you have a fantastic holiday. And no matter what your holiday is, whatever you're celebrating, even if it's just some time, quiet time away. Well, we have a lot of quiet in 2020. But let's try to make it happy and enjoy, and everybody stay safe. Those numbers are scary in Ontario. Lockdown is coming again right after Christmas. So let's plan on the future and help reduce our pandemic stress.
Yes, stay safe, everyone, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Be well.
It's fantastic seeing you again, my friend. Take care.
Happy holidays. Thanks, Sheila. Fantastic seeing you too.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.